All right, good morning, folks. Welcome back. Last day of JNUC, right? Everybody feeling okay? Maybe I should use more so my inside voices. Yeah, we're good? We're good? All right, very cool. I'm here to introduce Ross for our Reimagining Mac configurations. Welcome him to the stage.
All right, good morning. How are we feeling? Pretty good? Yeah. Wow, there's a lot more of you than I thought there was going to be. I appreciate you guys coming out. This is my first presentation. I'm going to be a little nervous, going to be a little amateurish maybe. Not only is this my first time presenting and attending JNUC, but this is my first time using Keynote. I've installed it hundreds and probably close to 1,000 times. I've never used it, which is a great line if you ever want to get out of a ticket. Like, listen, man, I just install this stuff, all right? I don't use it. So, as T said, my name is Ross Cobb. I work for Colgate University. I am a desktop administrator and infrastructure engineer. So I take care of our endpoints and also do a little bit of server and network administration as well. A little bit more about my background. I'm a computer science major at a small rinky-dink college formerly known as Wells College. May it rest in peace. We went through some programming, obviously, but I spent a lot of my time at the student help desk, which if any of you work in higher ed, you're probably familiar with the student help desk worker to full-time help desk worker pipeline. So I'm one of them. I moved my tassel from the right to the left and transitioned from end user to end user support. I did that for a couple of years, and then I transitioned on to a slightly more prestigious university. Show of hands, who's heard of Colgate University? Any NCAA? Yeah, okay, awesome. So I transitioned over there. I started working in the help desk, but kind of slowly transitioned after a year into our desktop administration team, which I'm going to get into that in a bit. So, a little bit more about Colgate University. If you don't know, we're located in Hamilton, New York, which is kind of the middle of nowhere. Lots of trees, lots of deer, but not really a whole much else going on besides Colgate. We're a liberal arts college. We're also primarily an undergraduate university, and we're also what we call residential, which means that everybody is mostly on-prem, minus a few exchange students that travel around the world. We have one faculty member that goes on a trip to Antarctica every year, and I'm just begging her, like, please take me with you. I can be your IT person on your trip. I just want to go, all right? So we have about 1,600 employees. This is like staff and faculty. There's a little bit of a divide there. But we also have about 4,000 students, and we're serviced by 51 IT staff. A little bit more about our environment. We service about 3,100 endpoints. 1,500 of those are Macs. Yeah, I just had to double check that number real quick. It's changing all the time. Show of hands, how much do you think that percentage comes out to? You just shout it out. It's about 50-50, okay? So I have to spend about half of my time managing Macs, and I spend the other half of my time managing our PC fleet. We have a couple of Chromebooks, but we don't talk about those. So we have a couple of different configuration types. We have our staff faculty image, which is just our one-to-one employee. We have our classroom machines, which are basically just AV multimedia, to display a presentation, put it on a projector, not unlike this. We have our lab configuration, which is just holds all of our software. We put it there for students to utilize it. Anyone that works in education is probably very familiar with these types. We also have some loaners, so when Professor Bob spills orange juice all over his keyboard, he gets to take one of ours for a temporary basis. And then we have another configuration type, which we call OUS. This is a program that Colgate does. I wish my wife was here. She works in admissions, and she could talk about this a lot more better than I can. But we provide laptops to some of our students that are either like first gen or kind of come from a lower financial background that they could use some assistance. So we provide them with MacBooks generally. And then also we have our desktop administration team, which for the purposes of this story, it's actually just me. I'm the whole team. So one of the biggest problems when you're a team of one, a one-man army, if you will, is that you don't have enough time in your day to make everything happen that you want to have happen, right? So what I'm going to try and give to you is a couple of examples of how you can leverage the tools that are in macOS provisioning, as well as Jamf or Apple School or Apple Business Manager to kind of get some of that time back. We're also going to talk about how you can use Jamf's API to help automate some of these processes and get more of that time back into your schedule. One of the things that I like to do when I do these things internally, not on stage like this, is that we like to go over acronyms, because everybody in IT loves acronyms, right? But the problem is that sometimes people, they just don't know what the acronyms are, and sometimes those acronyms mean different things to different people. So we're going to go over a couple of ones that I'm going to be using today. One of them is MDS, Mac Deploy Stick. Show of hands, who's heard of that? A couple of people. Yeah, I feel like it's a kind of an old school tool. It was made by a company that's called Two Canoes, but you basically set up a hard drive, flash drive, some kind of physical media, and you're using that to configure your OS. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. ASM, Apple School Manager, ABM, Apple Business Manager. For the purposes of this talk, they're more or less the same thing. We're going to also talk about pre-stages, which is just for the purposes of this as well, the different configuration types that we're going to be using. And then also we're going to talk about preload, which is the ability to upload certain data points to correlate with a device when it comes into service. The key note here, though, is that both of those words have the word pre, meaning that they need to be done prior to when the device is configured. So I promised the story, so we're going to start our story in 2022. So this is kind of the workflow that we're using. We're using Mac Deploy Stick, as I mentioned. And the process more or less starts with me packaging up all of the applications that we need to use for the school year, the latest version of Adobe, the latest version of Office, the latest version of whatever scientific software is out there that is required. And then one of the other things that comes with this is that you have to set up your OS. You have to download the actual .app OS installer that you want to install onto the Mac. You're also going to get your scripts in order to be able to configure any extra or additional settings that you want to do. You're going to take your drive that you've now prepared, and you're going to run it over to your computer. You're going to connect it in. You're going to boot that device to recovery so that you can launch and run the Mac Deploy Stick from there. You're going to walk away for about 30 to 60 minutes. You're going to come back, hope that it worked, and then we were doing user-initiated enrollment to Jamf from there by going to the web portal and doing the enrollment from there, from which that point the post-enrollment or enrollment completion or recurring check-in policies would take it over. So what are the pros of this? Well, it worked, right? Like, this was the process that I inherited when I came into the role. So clearly it was getting the job done. But one of the cons is that it's very manual, right? Like, you have to run it to all over campus, all the different buildings, getting to the new places, new to me anyway. You're limited by the number of drives that you have. So if you have 5 drives, you can only do 5 of them at a time. If you have 10 drives, you can do 10, so on and so forth, which means that there's also a hardware cost involved with having to go and get the hardware. You have to get the adapter, because this is Apple. You have to have an adapter for everything. And there's really little to no error handling in any of this. If you come back after 30 to 60 minutes and it failed, tough luck, bud. Which more or less comes down to the main point that I'm trying to get across today, is that all of this costs, you guessed it, a lot of time. So moving on to 2023 and 2024, I said there's got to be a better way to do this, right? Like, we're really going through it. And by we, I mean me. So we're going to move on to looking at Apple School Manager and utilizing pre-stages. So this is the workflow that we were using for that. It's kind of the same. It starts, you got to package up your applications. You got to package up your scripts, get them all updated for the newest version. You have to do your inventory preload. So you're putting in the information that you want assigned to that device when it comes online. We are then sending the erase content and settings command. So at the time, I think this is when Monterey had come out, or at least we were deploying Monterey in our environment. So we were able to utilize the erase content and settings. You'll notice that there's not an OS configuration stage up there, and that is because it is now handled by the Mac itself. You can just scrape all of your user data off the top of the OS, and you don't have to reinstall it, which saves you about 30 minutes. Moving on from there, we didn't have the device entry program set up through our Apple authorized reseller, which is just our bookstore. But we had to go around and hold an iPhone up to all of our current Mac fleet, and we were scanning them in. It looks like a little something like this. One of the other criteria of this is that you can see that there's a little chart. I apologize if you can't really make it out. I know this is the last day of JNUC. A lot of us had some late nights last night. So, but more or less, you have to meet certain levels of criteria regarding your iPhone and also the Mac that you are using. So from there we go. You're going to assign in-school manager or business manager to your device management service, so your Jamf Pro instance, and then you are going to assign that device to the PreStage, aka the type of image or configuration that you wanted to give to that device. It's going to run through Setup Assistant, and then it's going to run your Jamf policies. So I wanted to talk about one of the challenges with this, and this is how we were managing the inventory preload data. That is a spreadsheet, and I apologize. The previous session had everything in dark mode. I know this is light. Sorry, guys. I apologize. It's also really tiny. But essentially what this is a list of serial numbers and then all of the data points that you can use along with it. So user, email, contact information, the POs. But for the purposes of this presentation, there's really only 4 data points that I care about, and that's the building, the room number, the asset tag number that correlates with the device, and then the user for our one-to-one machines. And the reason that that's really important is because we have this script. So this is really where I started to cut my teeth on using the Jamf API. This is a script that goes ahead and gets the OAuth token to be able to communicate with Jamf and conduct certain actions. We're going to do some querying. We're going to find the serial number of the Mac that is running this script. We're going to use that to find the associated record in Jamf to get the building number, the building name, the room number, and the asset tag number that is associated with that device, which is all populated because we filled out our inventory preload. So another one of the complications of this, and I apologize again if you can't read this, but the inventory preload section is under Settings, General, Inventory Preload. The PreStage menu is underneath Computers, PreStage Enrollments, and then you have to select your PreStage type that you are going to assign your device to. So it lives in 2 different places. And quickly, before we carry on, we'll talk about some of the pros of this. One, it was so much faster. There was a lot of downtime in the beginning of having to go around and enroll all of our Macs via iPhone, and that took us 2 years to get that project fully finished, and we got all of this stuff implemented. But on the back end, things are a lot faster. I used to tell my bosses, I was like, we could wipe computers between classes and they would set themselves back up for the next class. This is great. I wouldn't recommend doing that. It's not great practice, and it usually doesn't meet that 15-minute criteria, but it is theoretically possible. We have way better logging and error handling in this, so because this is all taking place inside of Jamf and not some external tool, we can see the logs of what happened. We can flush them so that it reruns the policies. And then we can also remediate by catching when errors occur and either having it retry policies, or you can use some scripting logic to put it into a smart group, for example, and then a policy will trigger based on membership of that. Lower hardware costs, so we didn't have to buy any more adapters or hard drives or any of that. And then after you get the enrollment by iPhone or you get these devices into your school manager instance, it's largely automated. And by automated, I don't mean like, oh, it completely hands off the wheel, but we don't have to run around anymore, or we don't have to conduct what we call sneaker net, right? So things are a little bit better. We have some cons, and one of those cons is that the process for preloading information really was not the best. I tried teaching our service desk because I am a one-man army. The more that I can offload onto other people, the better my life will become. It was just really complicated to try. I had a document that was maybe 10 pages long of like, go here, and then you go there. And you like, feel like you're playing an MMO or something of like all the side quests that just keep building up in terms of trying to get to this place where you're actually configuring the Mac. So training, the preloading process, and it was just also really ambiguous of what was going on to our help desk team when they were trying to conduct this process. So moving forward to this year, and this is kind of the main reason I'm here on top of telling you this story. So I built a tool, and I am calling it the PreStage tool, but I'm really open to suggestions. You guys can find me by the expo if you have better suggestions for a name. But for all intents and purposes right now, we're just calling it the PreStage tool. So the process looks a little something like this. Still packaging up our applications. We're leveraging app installers where we can, but we're still having to do that piece. Still have to update scripts where you do. But now all we have to do is look up to the device. So I'm using one of the classic API endpoints that's called match. And so you can match based on any piece of information that is associated with that device. You can use the name, you can use the serial number, you can use the asset tag number, you can use the user that's assigned to that device. You can even look it up by MAC address if you really wanted to. You're then going to use that tool to fill in your preload data and assign a configuration to it. So you're going to assign your PreStage. We have 3 button options. We have our update. So that's going to send the information that you filled out on the tool, and it's going to use the varying API endpoints to update not just the preload information, but also the inventory record if it's actively deployed. There is the wipe command, so that's going to send the MDM command that just wipes the device, and then it's going to go back through, set up assistant, and all of those other things. If it's on a wired connection, if it's on wireless, they'll have to go through and click to the menu where then you connect the Wi-Fi, and your zero-touch deployment kicks off from there. We also have a retirement function, so same thing as the wipe command, but it's going to send the wipe command. It's going to delete the inventory record out of Jamf Pro. It is going to then send a retirement command to our asset management system, so it's going to mark it as retired. And then hopefully one day we'll get an API endpoint for Apple School Manager / Business Manager where we can release the device from the organization, and at which point we then take the device and throw it in the trash. So moving on from there, we're leveraging the API endpoints, and then also your Jamf policies are going to take over and really configure the device from there. So a couple of technical details about our tool that we wrote. I say us, I had a student help me with this. His name's Luke Filler. He took this tool from like the rough ideas I had and the horrible UX I had, and he streamlined them. He made them a lot prettier to look at and a lot easier. He also helped me out with the Docker configuration that I'll talk about in a second. But it's written in TypeScript. I actually wrote this project originally in Python, discovered that Python for web is not that great, so I converted all of it through AI to TypeScript, which is more or less just JavaScript. So this is all set up and containerized through Docker. We have a Docker Compose that just stands up the back end, which is the server that is going to send the information to your front end, but it's also the one that's making the API calls to your Jamf Pro instance. Again, you have your front end, which is just what you see on the web page in front of you. We're leveraging Jamf's API, as I've probably said hundreds of times already. And then we're also leveraging the MSAL library for Entra authentication, which is super nice for us because we are still on the Microsoft Entra authentication to our Jamf Pro instance, so we can kind of reuse the same access groups that we use in Jamf Pro to determine access in our tool. So without further ado, this is what it looks like. I really did not think this through as to how big these things would be in a room this size. But more or less, all it's really doing is just correlating all of the different data points that I care about onto a single page. So you can see that there's the computer name. You can see that there's the asset tag field. I have the MAC addresses listed out here because we use MAC address registration for network access control on campus. So it's a one-stop shop to grab the MAC address and copy paste it into ClearPass, make sure that it's in the right VLANs or that it's registered at all. You can see that there's an enrollment method field. The enrollment method field is the last type of enrollment the device conducted. So one of the oddities of things that we discovered when we were going through this process was that if it goes through a PreStage, it'll tell you what PreStage it was in. If it was user initiated by going to the web, it'll say user initiated. And then if you're still using a quick add package, bless your soul, but it'll say that too. However, if you need to remediate a device that has already been configured by PreStage and you need to re-enroll it, well, now it's going to say user-initiated enrollment, but that's not really true, right? Because it was configured via PreStage. So that's why I added the current PreStage field. And so this is the field that's populated by the different API commands to really show you, OK, this is what it is currently assigned to. If you were to wipe this device today and you were to reset it up, what process or what configuration type is that device going to get? We're also populating the building and room number fields. So for building, because you set buildings as items inside of Jamf, you can query the available buildings that are there. So if you're adding and removing from there, that'll all be reflected over here. And so you can select from a drop-down, you type in the room number, you type in your asset tag number, and then you can also select a PreStage, and you can hit send, right? So you can also wipe the device and then retire, as I mentioned earlier. Some of the pros of this is that you're leveraging the full capabilities of the Jamf API to really try and make this process a lot smoother, less jumping through hoops, trying to speed things up so that we're not wasting as much time. You have the word data safe here. I don't mean it's like the most secure tool. Like, I'm not a security guy. I don't have that most training in this. Obviously, I'm using the OAuth tokens. I'm using Entry ID. I'm trying to be as secure as I can. But really, what I really mean by data safe in this case is that I'm really limiting the amount of areas in which somebody can just type some garbage in. I'm really trying to limit them to drop-down menus where possible so that we can make sure that we're getting accurate, good data into Jamf Pro for setting up our devices. It's also a lot easier to use than the previous systems because it's all under one pane of glass. So some of the cons, it's not perfect by any means. The setup can get pretty complicated. I'm not a Docker wizard by any means. I'm not a great software engineer. I'm not even a software engineer by trade. I'm an IT guy. So it's not the simplest thing in the world to set up, as much as I tried. It also requires a bit of maintenance. So it's, API endpoints are changing all of the time. You have to really stay on top of that. I've already had it happen to me a couple of times where an API endpoint changed, and I had to go into the code and update it from version 2 to 3, 3 to 4, et cetera. And then also, if you want to add more functionality, you have to add it to the code base. So speaking of the code base, this is all hosted in GitHub. You can see the link there. I also put this QR code up on screen. This has my contact information, so if you want to get in touch with me and you want to follow up with me and have some questions and get it set up for your environment, the GitHub link is there. It's open source. I welcome any volunteers to help me kind of flesh this out a little bit more and maintain it. There's a lot of good READMEs in there for how to do the stuff that's there. However, all you really need to do is just configure a .env or an environment file with your API client ID, client secrets, and as well as the URL for where you're going. And so with that, I'm definitely way ahead of schedule. So if we are OK, T, I would love to move into some Q&A. Any questions?
Yeah. Go ahead and just raise your hand, and I'll try to run over to you as quickly as possible to get your questions asked to Ross. All right, we just suffered the 7 seconds of silence. So that is officially closed. No questions, none? All right, well then, thank you all for joining our session this morning, and thank you, Ross, as well.